Hello, this is Nicole Smith, the Monitoring and Evaluation Senior Specialist, and this training is for ambassadors, and it's going to cover the different types of activities that are in the new Community Impact Tracker. Now, with the start of the program year 2020 to 2021, we've started a different reporting process. So before that, everything that you did other than a play group or a steering committee meeting that you might do since COVID-19, there was one entry you would do per week, and everything you did was in that one entry, and it was under the other activity type. And that was in the old tracker. And going forward, as of July 1, 2020, we're going to now similarly have weekly or even, bi-weekly, monthly entries, but it will be per activity type. And the different activity types in the Community Impact Tracker can be found in our activity guide. So this guide, it talks about what is included in community impact work, what goes in the tracker, what doesn't. But the purpose of this training is really explicitly to go through the activity type. So you can scroll through this guide. There's guidance on different ways of reporting things. It talks about every single field in the Community Impact Tracker, but the purpose of this training is really going to be to review this activity type list. And I'll show you the Community Impact Tracker. So if you go to the USPA Partner Portal, you select Early Childhood Development and click on Early Steps to School Success. It will take you to this landing page. And then on the left here are your ambassador resources. And so we've got the Community Impact Tracker located here. Now, for July 1st onward, you're going to put all of your play groups, those activities in the tracker, but then everything else is going to go into this Community Impact Tracker. So there's two trackers, and they vary what goes in them by the activity. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this Community Impact Tracker. There's a different training reviewing how to use this tracker, how to submit entries into it, but just to show you the activity list that we're going to be reviewing, I'll go ahead and I'll click as if I were to do a new entry. Let's just pick a state. And I'm going to scroll down, and this activity category field is the one where you click on it and you get a drop down of a good number of activity types, as you can see here. So the purpose of this training is for ambassadors explicitly to talk about the different activity types you're likely to report under and the differences between them. So I'm going to go back to the tracking guide. And there's a few categories that we have these different activities under. So we've got one activity category is awareness raising. And that's any type of activity where only what's happening is awareness raising. So you could technically say that any opportunity where you're sharing resources, providing training, doing educational content, it might be a learning opportunity, but it's also at the same time raising awareness about the need for those learning opportunities. But we're really trying to make the distinction between things when there is no learning opportunity, no educational content is happening. All that's going on is awareness raising. So this could be awareness raising about, hey, an event is going to come up. A service is going to be available. It might be recruitment for a program. It might be a media campaign, but really all that's happening is awareness raising. So that's one of our categories. Another category is events and meetings. And this is one where I think a lot of ambassadors have reported this sort of thing before. We'll go into this in further detail later. Another category is distributions only. So similar to awareness raising, where everything we do is awareness raising, but that category is for only awareness raising. So too, distributions all of the time we'll have a community event and we're handing out books, we're distributing items, we're handing out food. We do a lot of these things together, but these activities are one that is all that is happening. You're either distributing things to families or to schools. We also have programs and policy. Now, a lot of these are not going to be applicable to ambassadors, but some are, so I'll point those out, but it's pretty much what you would expect. Programming with families. And then we've got training and technical assistance. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish what is a training versus, technical assistance versus a program, but we've got some activity types that might be applicable to ambassadors. So those are the 5 categories, and then under each of these are different activity types. So I'm going to walk through these types and explicitly call out for ambassadors the ones you're likely to report under. So under awareness raising, so the 2 activity types are, we've got under awareness raising, we've got communications and media campaigns, and then just we've got an other catch-all. If it doesn't fit anywhere else, but you think it's awareness raising only, it can fit here. So as an ambassador, you may be likely to do communications and media campaigns. So for instance, maybe you're on Facebook and you post, hey, there's going to be an opportunity, and you're trying to recruit. You're notifying people about an upcoming program, initiative, resources. Can be online, it can be in person, it can be a poster. But this is really not about educational content. It's really not about giving adults, parents, or child serving professionals info that they're going to then use with children. It's really just awareness raising. So this might be something that you all do. This can be, online, it can be flyers, a sign in front of a school. Hey, we've got playgroups starting in a few weeks. So this might be something that you would likely report under. It can be difficult to know what number of kids and adults to report for this sort of a thing. And so this might be an instance where you might reach out to me about, oh, hey, I think I might have reached this many people. So this can be a little hard to know the number of people to enter, but this as an ambassador is one you might report under. We've got a catch-all other awareness raising that might be applicable as well, but I think most things would fall under communications and media campaigns. So now the next category, and I think this is one where you're very much likely to report under these. We've got events and meetings, and then the first one is really all that's happening is an awareness raising event. So maybe there's a back to school night and you have a table with flyers on it and people are walking by, and it's not a lot of interaction. It's really light touch, awareness raising, recruitment, outreach. It's not necessarily about a learning opportunity or providing educational content. So that might be one, especially before COVID-19 when we were meeting in person that you might have done, but this could even happen online. It could be there's an online meeting and you just have a plug of, hey, FYI, there's this opportunity coming up. Next up, and this is one as an ambassador you might be likely to report under, are collaborative group meetings. Now, in the Vroom project that ended June 30th, 2020, in that project for Vroom, we called these collaborative steering committees. And so some of those steering committees are going to continue, and inside of Save the Children, we'll call them something different, but the actual group is going to continue calling themselves whatever they've called themselves. And then similarly, some of the people that were community engagement ambassadors, and their role has now changed to a community engagement coordinator, they're likely to continue with steering committees or even join new collaboratives. So when you have a collaborative group meeting, you would go ahead and do an entry for that. So these can be in person or these can be online, but basically it's just a meeting of a group that regularly comes together to make collaborative decisions on how to identify and address community needs. There are a lot of names that these groups go by, dependent on the project. So if you have any questions about whether the group you're working with counts as a collaborative, you can reach out to your supervisor or to myself. And then an example of something that we wouldn't report is if there's a meeting of another established group that you might join regularly, but it's not a collaborative, for instance, a Rotary meeting, that would be something that we would not ask you to report on. So then we've got another two categories that are similar, but they're a little bit different. Under events and meetings, we've got a community educational event and we've got a school center educational event. So the distinction between them is it's an event where there is an expectation there will be learning opportunities or educational information, and this information is something that the adults can use with their either personally or as they interact with children. The distinction between them is this is open to all community members, so it could actually be at a school, but if it's open to the public, then it would be a community-facing educational event. Now, the distinction here is, regardless of where it's held, if it is an event that is open just to the families enrolled at a school or a center, but still the expectation of it being a learning opportunity or having educational information provided, then that would go under this. So this is less about where it happens and it's more about who is it trying to serve. And so sometimes if it's a little hard to know which is which, go with your best judgment of which type of event or meeting you think it is. Now, all of these can happen online or remotely. And so for every one of these, you're going to have an opportunity of saying, where did it happen in the site field of the tracker? And you can put online or an actual location there. So this isn't really about the medium, whether it's online or in person. It's about who we're serving. So now we've got two different types of activities under distributions. And again, this is for one that is all that is happening. At a lot of community events, you're going to be distributing books and toys and every other thing. And there's a way we can capture that in the tracker. But this is when the only thing that is happening is you're distributing food. And similar to the community events and meetings where it's about who is being served, we've got a distinction of distributions based on, does it serve families or does it stay with the schools and centers? So if you're distributing something, and it doesn't matter what it is, it could be books, it could be food, it could be anything, and eventually it goes to families and will stay in homes, that's distributions for families. Now, you may be distributing it through a partner. There might be a community store where there is a bookshelf where the books are free to take home. Well, that's through a center, but it's going home. It is staying in a household, and therefore it's going to serve families in homes. Then that would be a distribution that ultimately ends up in the hands of families. Meanwhile, if you distribute something and the resources are going to stay in that center, they're not going home, then that would be an instance of a distribution for schools or center. So in the same example of a bookshelf, if it's expected that the books are going to be returned, those books aren't going home. It's really for use when families are in that store. And it's not going to end up in a household, and that would be distributions for schools, centers. Maybe you're replenishing the bookshelf in a classroom in a school, for instance. So it's really about who are we serving. And you may, as an ambassador, use these activity types. Now, next, we're going on to programs and policy. And I want to call out this first one. We have this on this guide, but it's actually not going to be found in the Community Impact Tracker. This first activity type is the 3 to 5 kindergarten readiness playgroups. It's on this list because it is an activity that is understood under the very large umbrella of community impact work, but it does not go into our community impact tracker. So here's the definition of what that activity type is, but here you can see this activity should go into the playgroup tracker, and here is a link. And we also have the playgroup registry. That's a list of what playgroups are active or closed. So we really have playgroups separate from the rest of our community impact work, but it is on this list just to call it out. So while you will absolutely, as an ambassador, be reporting on playgroups, they won't go into the community impact tracker. But one thing that I think you will very much be using as an ambassador are check-ins and referrals, especially since COVID-19. A lot of you are texting, emailing, messaging on Facebook, your families that you've served previously in playgroups, or even new people, community partners, just checking in. Hey, how are you doing? how's it going? Do you need anything? What are your challenges? What's going well for you? You know, through asking those questions, connecting them to resources maybe, or even formally referring them to services or programs. We know this is happening a lot. And so this is something that I think as an ambassador, you guys can report on. And this is something where you can check in on 20 families over the course of 2 weeks, and it's one entry. We don't need an entry for every single conversation or for every single family or partner. It's just an overarching, I'm checking in with folks, and you know, what came of those conversations. Now, a lot of these other activity types here, you're going to see, say, Journey of Hope. That's one of our psychosocial programs, and that's not one as an ambassador you are likely to use. So I'll just skip over that. And then we've just got an other catch-all, other programs with children and families. In some instances, we've had schools create their own pre-K program, or come up with a free community child screening opportunity, something like that. This happens very infrequently, so you're not likely to use this as an ambassador, but it's a catch-all. If what you're doing doesn't fit anywhere else, you can report it under this type. And then we have policy change. We've not really encountered this much with our ambassador work, so that's not one you're likely to have to report under. Now the rest are around training and technical assistance. And as an ambassador, you're not likely to use many of these. There might be a few that you would. Our first step is a very specific certification through Child Development Associates, professional development. That is not one as an ambassador you're likely to use. Ones you might use is if you are at a conference or a workshop and maybe you do a little presentation, and it could be something that's sort of educational. It's more than just awareness raising of, hey, Save the Children is in this community and we're doing this work. But at the same time, it's not really expected that the people hearing your workshop or your presentation are going to take it, apply it with children that they work with. That might be something you may want to report on. And then we also have general training and technical assistance. In the Vroom grant, you might have done trainings on brain building basics or trainings on early childhood development. And these trainings, we've got 3 different types depending on who you're training. This is just general adults. You don't know if they're caregivers, parents, or child serving professionals, or it could be both. And then we've got one where you know it's just parents, you know it's just child serving professionals. So if you're really training folks and there is an expectation that the information you're providing them will be used with kids, then you can use these. And then you would in the description field say, what was that training and what content was covered? So these might be ones you could use as an ambassador. Now there are 2 others here that are really not likely for you to use. These are going to be more applicable to our psychosocial work. That's training and TA when we've done an implementation of partners that we've trained. So we've trained someone and then that person has gone on and implemented the program that they were trained to do. And then this is sort of training them to be able to implement. This is really not applicable to you as an ambassador, so you're really not going to need to use these. And then we've got another catch-all, other capacity building, training, technical assistance. If it doesn't fit anywhere else, you can use this category here. So those are the different activity types. And this is very different from what you're accustomed to in the Vroom activities reporting page, where for the last several weeks, you've done a weekly entry and it could have included every single one of these activity types. So we're now transitioning that we would like an entry by activity type, but we realize that means more data entry. So to really make it not too burdensome, we do encourage where it makes sense to do entries that cover a good amount of time. So if you're doing a distribution 3 days out of a week for 3 weeks, you could just do one entry and say, I did this many distributions over a span of 3 weeks, and that's absolutely more than sufficient. And similarly, if you've got a collaborative group meeting and you're meeting every week, that's a lot to report on. So maybe you could talk to your supervisor about doing a monthly entry that encompasses all 4 of those meetings. So there are ways to reduce data entry and not make it too burdensome. So if you have any questions about how you can do that, feel free to reach out. And then additionally, in the guide, as you scroll up, it talks about exactly that, reoccurring activities, and how you can try to make life easier for yourself based on reducing the number of entries you do. So that is the review of our reporting guide for the Community Impact Tracker, and explicitly the activity type. So if you have any questions, reach out to me, Nicole Smith, and thank you so much.